Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, J.D. Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join J.D. now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Well, welcome to yet another edition of Leading Conversations with Excel Leadership Network. Today, we are thrilled to have Rick McKinley. I hear he is kind of a big deal, and Rick is here from Portland, Oregon. Is it raining in Portland at the time?
No, it is 85 degrees here. It's insane.
That's wonderful. Now, are you from Sacramento?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area in Concord.
Oh, wow.
Then we moved to Citrus Heights outside of Sac when I was in high school, my sophomore year. And then I went up to go to Chico State because it was the number one party school that
Of
year.
course. It still might be.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. And then I started having some kind of spiritual awakening, it's very kind of new agey in the 80s, late 80s. And I couldn't meditate. I was just a dumb jock. Like I couldn't get into that. So I dropped out and then kind of came home and kept being kind of wild and partying. And then I walked into a church on Palm Sunday.
Wow. So that's your story. So I have a similar story. I grew up in LA. We moved to the Bay Area, to Walnut Creek. So I went to high school in Concord, De La Salle over there.
Oh, wow.
And then, but then my senior year, we moved over here into the Sacramento area. And, but I was going to go to Berkeley, but I decided, my dad said, yeah, you're paying for it. So I went to UCLA, but, yeah, talk about that. You didn't grow up in a Christian home.
No, we never went to church, that I remember. So I literally had no, as much of a blank slate, I think, as you could have going into a church setting. That was me. And I was drinking pretty hard and partying and had started blacking out. And I was like, man, I need some help. And so I was going to go to AA or church, and church seemed easier. So I went to the closest church to my house, and it was Palm Sunday. I didn't know what that was. I literally thought they were going to read my palm, which sounds so dumb now, but I know,
that makes a lot of sense.
Palm branches didn't mean anything to me, So I just listened, and then they had several things during the week, and I just kept coming back, and God got a hold of me. It's somewhere in that week, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing this now, whatever this is.
Really?
I remember when I went to church, my dad was like, if you go to church, those people come to the house. And I was like, how would you know? You know what I mean? We never went to church. And 2 weeks later, no kidding, the door knocks, and there's these two dudes in suits outside my house. And I'm like, he knew. I think my dad was like smoking pot in the other room, so it was an odd conversation. But they made me pray a prayer, so I was official, I guess, at that point.
So that's how you officially turned to Christ.
Yeah. And it was a pretty radical for me. I had done everything, and I had 11 jobs the year before. Like, I just couldn't get traction. I never got fired. I just was like, oh, there's something better. And there was probably a young entrepreneur in there that didn't know what he was doing. But there was just a sense that, like, man, this is God's love was super palpable, and things were connecting. I understood Jesus. I didn't understand church. Like that was so confusing to me. And I mean, I got along with so many different groups, like in high school and college, the jocks, the stoners, the artists, the whatever. And I could not figure out Christians to save my life.
What
And
was
looking
what was your
back, I
sport?
realized,
What was your sport, by the way?
football and wrestling and baseball.
And what was your position in football?
I mean, offensive line.
Okay. But the reason I bring that up is that I was just talking with a couple of college church planters on our network who are college offensive linemen in the SEC, and they just said that the offensive line room is like the closest one, because you got to be humble. And the
Yeah.
offensive line guys, they were the ones who loved football. As far as I wanted to stay out of there. But that's how you learn how to get along with everybody, right? You're just you're
Oh
the
yeah.
you're the glue that holds the whole team together.
Oh yeah. And they never let you touch the ball. It's it's very much like church planning. It's very thankless. Unless you're a left tackle, because after, Joe Theismann went down, left tackles became the second highest paid player on the team, I hear. So I
Wow.
should have I should have gotten taller. I might have been able to pull that off, but
So you're in church and you're starting to understand Jesus, but not quite getting church.
no, and as I look back on it, knowing the church a little better, I have like compassion on these college singles ministry guys. I mean, their whole life was spent in church, so it all made sense to them. I couldn't figure out why we're doing group singing at every event. Like I'd never sang with a group of people in my entire life, and now I can't go to a small group of Bible study. We're all going to sing, and I was trying to figure out like what's with the singing, like what's with the group singing. So yeah, I figured out it was worship and it kind of caught on, but they're singing the goofy songs and people are dancing around, giving each other high fives. I'm just like, get me out of here.
Well, you must have hung with it.
I did. I mean, for me, it's funny because people like church is such a huge obstacle for people, and I get that. I just had this encounter with God that was like, man, I'm in, so I can't shake church. I'll try to figure it out. I did that for 10 years. I worked at a Presbyterian church and a Baptist church and a Willow Creek wannabe church. And, just going like, I'm trying to adapt. Like, I realize the problem's me. So I will try to figure out how to navigate this world. And when my kids turned 7, that's when I was like, man, I would never have made it in these churches growing up, and I want my kids to see like what I experienced, which was so real and transcendent and powerful and raw, but they weren't going to get that in the churches I was serving in. And so that was really kind of one of the core reasons why we planted Imago Dei, was I wanted my kids to at least have the best shot at trusting and seeing the real Jesus, in action. So
Wow, that's a great story. Now, just to back up a little bit, these two guys show up in suits at your door, and then you go into ministry. How did that happen? Was there a call, or it's a natural thing, or another
yeah, I mean,
job?
I was 19, so I didn't really know. I didn't have much of a direction in terms of a vocation. I did sense like I wanted to serve Jesus. I didn't know what that was. I remember reading Acts 20, kind of 22 through 24 there, where he's like, I'm going to Jerusalem to die. the Holy Spirit's warning me that I'm going to be in prison, but my life's not worth anything unless I finish the race and testify of the gospel of God's grace, complete the task. And that resonated. Like, that's what I wanted to be about. And I didn't know Bible schools or colleges existed, but the youth pastor had gone to Multnomah up in Portland. And so 9 months after I came to faith, I was at Multnomah trying to figure out that world.
That was fast.
Yeah, too fast for them, too fast for me, probably. I was telling dirty jokes to profs, thinking they were clean, and the only way I could discern it was dirty was the look on everybody's face after I told the joke. And it was funny because years later I was leading the D-Min program, starting the D-Min program at Multnomah with some of those profs from way back in the day.
Was that shocking to them?
I don't think so, because I'd planted and they kind of had watched me grow up in faith, but yeah, they would not have placed that bet when I was at school, I'm pretty sure.
Well, fast forward again, you're starting this church. So how did that happen?
So when I was 30, my dad wanted me to come back to California and plant or start a business with him. And we kind of were planning on doing that. I had gotten connected with David Nicholas in Boca Raton, and later me and Mark Driscoll started Acts 29. So I had an opportunity from David that he would fund me for like a year and a half, and that was on the table. And we came to Portland to make sure we shouldn't plant. And I was like at Starbucks reading the Gospel of John, and it's the wedding feast at Cana, and Jesus changes water to wine. I looked over in the margins, and those 6 vats were 180 gallons of wine, and I was like, man, that seems excessive. Like, if I was at a party and they ran out of beer, and I was like, don't worry, I have 180 gallons in my truck. And then the next scene, he's turning over the temple. And the question that God put in my head, I guess, was, would you be comfortable hanging out with Jesus? Or would you be making excuses like, hey, it's his first miracle. Sorry, he made so much alcohol. And, he gets angry sometimes. Like, realizing that just after 10 years in the church, I was all of a sudden uncomfortable. Like, enough of that culture of separatist culture had gotten into me that I was like, man, I would be uncomfortable around the Jesus of the Gospels. And just sensed an invitation to, like, would you be this radical to reach people I love? And I said, you should tell my wife that we're not going to go to California. And he did. So we went home and resigned and started Imago.
Wow. Hey, talk about the early days of the church, the church plant.
Yeah, so we had been in Portland when we were in school, and we had been at a church that was about 4 hours east in this little rural town of, I mean, the smallest place I'd lived by 1 million people. But the ministry I led there had a bunch of kids that had left to go to college in Portland, and we had done some significant kind of ministry. There was a core team of college kids that were like, yeah, we should totally plant a church. That makes sense. And had enough faith and naivete to do it. And so we started with like 15 people in our living room, and they were, 18 to 20-year-olds. I think we had 2 couples that were over 30, and that was the core team. We started to turn into kind of a singles group with a bunch of people who love to read about mission and talk about mission and yet not do mission. And I was kind of true of me at the time. And I realized the only way to like create an actual want to, I mean, we always, I think how to is question of apathy that the church loves to stay in. You know, Jesus is like, love your neighbor. And we're like, how do you love your neighbor? I mean, this is crazy. I need to take a class. I need to go to seminary. One day I'll be able to. And he's like, hear and obey. That's all I want you to do. And so just being honest with God that, man, we don't want to love the people you sent us here to love. So I remember I thought, well, the only way I know how to do that is we have to get before God and just be honest with God. So I announced like on Sunday during a core group meeting, we're going to meet on Wednesday night and repent and just try to get God to change our heart. I wouldn't recommend like that's the greatest way to start your church.
That's
And what was
usually not one of the top
it's
strategies
yeah.
for launching a church. To have a repentance service on Wednesday night.
But the thing that was cool is okay for on my side, Jesus did say, "Repent, the kingdom." You know, that's kind of how he said to kick it
Yeah,
off. So
it's a
I had
good
that going
way to do it.
for me. But the thing that was beautiful about it and like terrifying is how honest the kids were. Like they're like, God, I don't believe in you, I don't think, and God, I hate my neighbors. And I just drove home like, wow, I think I just tanked the whole project. But after about 9 months, I always liken church planning to like growing flowers or vegetables, and you plant the seed in the ground and the seed has to die. And the first 9 months I'm just yelling at dirt like, please grow something, come up, dear God. And it eventually it did. Like hearts started to change, and that little core group of 15 people started doing ministry that they kind of invented in Portland, just reaching Portlanders who wouldn't show up in church. Ministries that went on for like a decade plus, you know. Joe, this 20-year-old guy, takes his camp stove and he's on 6th and Pine, and there's no services for homeless people on Saturdays and kind of that afternoon of Saturday. And so he starts 3 o'clock people. He's cooking who knows what on his camp stove, and 6 guys show up, and then 7, and like within 6 months, there's 100 homeless people showing up and building relationships with Joe and this team of kids. It turns out it's illegal. You need a food handler's permit, so we got Joe a food handler's permit. So lots of stuff like that where they were young and they weren't old enough to know we shouldn't like obey Jesus in these ways. So it was in some ways, I don't think I could have planted Imago with anybody but that group of kids.
Yeah, wow. Then obviously the church grew. You weren't meeting on the street. Where were you meeting? How was that going?
Yeah, I mean, we met in this little church, this little chapel at Warner Pacific, and we during that core phase, so we start actually trying to gather a core in January of 2000. By the time we get to October, we have about 50 people and we officially launch. That was 25 years ago this October. And by January, we're kind of out of money. And so Jeff Marsh and Beth Livingston, this 2 people that like gave their lives away to start Imago, have this like really come to Jesus moment. Like, man, this isn't going to fund us. So we either get jobs or shut it down. It was such a purifying moment as I look back on it, because we both felt the conviction, like, no, we're supposed to do this. He started painting houses. I was consulting and doing whatever I could do. And then in that year, everything kind of started to take off. We went from like 50 to 250, 250 to 4, and those first 7 or 8 years, it just grew quite fast for, I think, back then. I remember Rick Warren saying like it took him 15 years to get to 1500 or something. And it's interesting because he was like, you guys are growing much faster than we did. But you look at the young planners now, and some of them are getting to 1,000 within a couple years. So the speed at which we can gather a crowd might accelerate, but the time it takes to build a church, I don't think has ever changed. It's a slow process.
Yeah, there is a difference between the crowd and the congregation, or the core, as Rick Warren would say. Yeah. Hey, talk about the early days of Acts 29 then.
Yeah, so David Nicholas, he was this 70-year-old guy that planted Spanish River in Boca Raton. It they planted over 300 churches in his lifetime there of 30 years, and had been given money, to a lot of PCA churches over a lot of that time because he was a PCA plant. And got frustrated that they would take money, start, a reformed church somewhere in the country and not do evangelism, not share their faith. And David was a huge evangelist. And he just got tired of seeing these guys put up their reformed witness flag somewhere in the country and have 50 people 20 years later. So I think he met Driscoll and then me, and I was sort of David's first non-PCA plant. And it's fascinating. The first gathering of when we were forming Acts 29, it was kind of David's brainchild, was this super diverse group of people. It was, Shane Claiborne was there, and Doug Paget and Driscoll. Like, it's just super eclectic. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be like a new Reformation, in 2000. And then I think year two, the 5-point Calvinist doctrinal statement came out, and that just blew up the whole thing. And but I stayed with it. Part of the commitment was David would fund you X amount, and then you would kick back 10% into church planning until that got paid off, but
Right.
hopefully it was forever. And the beautiful thing is, I think he gave us $80,000, and
Wow.
over the years, Imago, like, we planted 17 churches, and like that money for 2 years multiplied, exponentially with the money that Imago put towards church planning. So I could kind of see the genius of it, and I was like, this is important. I want to stick around for this.
Oh, good, good. Hey, I know it's a podcast, and on podcasts, you're not allowed to do this, but can you say something good about Mark Driscoll? Um, I was
when
with
we
Mark years
when
ago.
we
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I asked Mark when he was planting in Arizona. Somebody introduced me, and I said, "Well, what do you need? Can we help you? What's your big?" He said, "I just need some friends." So I've tried to be a friend, but
That's good, man.
um, he is, the Mark I know is a good guy. So
That's good.
say something good if you can.
In those early days, Mark and I were pretty close, and he was one of the smartest dudes I think I'd met, and I left in 2004, and my prayer for him was just that he'd find someone to submit to during that whole thing. But after 2004, I wasn't part of it anymore at that point. So I haven't stayed in touch with him. So I couldn't tell you what he's up to today.
Okay. Yeah, you planted 17 churches. How did that happen? That's not how we do it in America. We plant our own deal.
Yeah.
It's all about us.
I mean, I think having David sort of put that into the DNA
Sure.
and seeing the wisdom of it, um, it caught on for us. We planted in a variety of ways, from funding to funding and coaching to funding, coaching, sending. And I think some of the funnest ones were the ones where it was the full package, right? We had a Kyle Costello take 40 people from Imago and Portland to go plant Missio in Salt Lake City. And it wasn't just college kids, it was like families quitting jobs and moving. And he took staff. And we were like, anyone you can pull, you can take. And so 2 years into him kind of being embedded, and it was like, wow, they're following him, and he's since moved to SoCal to plant, but Heather Thomas is still leading that church over there. So it's just it was part of our DNA for a long time. I think it still is post COVID. I think they're trying to figure it out, but um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it created so much energy in the church. We multiply, we don't divide. And having church planners and encouraging people to go and, consider, like, hey, maybe you've been a leader here, but there's another level of kind of invitation that Jesus is inviting you to actually be part of starting a church. And I mean, for some of these people, it was maybe the first time they really did anything in a church, and it was to help plant one, which
Yeah.
I love that.
Wow. So what are you doing now?
Yeah, now I transition out of the lead role at Imago. We have two congregations locally. Mike Dean leads East Side, and Chris and I lead Central City. So I kind of coach them. I preach for them. I work with Pastors PDX in Portland. We've been blessed by having a lot of unity in the Church of Portland, serving together, working together. Being in a really unchurched environment, I think, knocks some of the edges off our insecurities. We really need each other. So I get to kind of steward that a little bit, and keep investing and keeping the pastors connected. And then I lead cohorts of a lot of young pastors in Portland. So there's been kind of a major transition of new pastors. A lot of 30 something pastors are taking their first role in Portland. And so I'm loving that. They're just such a great group of men who want to finish well, women that want to finish well. And that's really my heart, is to go, you need to have a spiritual life that is empowering you to lead with gospel integrity. And those two things really go together if you're gonna kind of be that self-defined leader, that Jesus-defined leader with a non-anxious presence that can call people to the hard things that Jesus is inviting us to walk into.
Okay, so how often are you preaching then?
I preach about 6 times at each congregation, and then I've gotten to preach more around the city, which is super fun to see what God's doing in these other churches and works. So I could be preaching more than more than I was at Amaga. So I'm sort of trying to dial it down a little bit, but it's really fun. I'm enjoying it.
Oh, good. Now, I have heard from a couple other folks about the PDX Portland deal, the pastors there. How did that happen where they just started to come together? You mentioned it's an unchurched area, so there's kind of a need, but how did all that happen?
Well, in So we had been working really hard to serve the city and be the kind of church that the city would be bummed if we left, because we were just adding value and participating. And then built a relationship with Kevin and Luis Palau. And in '08, there was this idea, we went to the mayor and we said, what are the top three needs of Portland? A big one was the graduation rate. And we were like, how could we work together to kind of make that mission the mission of the churches? And so local schools were a natural connection, where if every local school connects with the local church, like, you have access to pretty much everybody in your community. And so it was a win for the specific church's mission. That was kind of one of the keys. It can't just be this big, we did all this, and I had to do it and go do my mission. We had to make sure this is mission critical for you as a local church. But if we all do it collectively, it has like that exponential power to it. And Luis did kind of a rally downtown, and we did this day of service, this city of service thing. I think there were 26,000 volunteers, many
Yikes.
mobilized through the churches. And so, Sam Adams, who was the mayor at the time, was like, we got to do this every year, and announced it from the stage. And we're like, oh, okay, we're on. But it really was a very unlikely positive relationship that we had with Sam and his office and the churches collectively working together. That's had a varied, different mayors come in, and there's different levels of interest to kind of partner with us. But we've worked with city commissioners and other groups, and so that just kind of kicked off. Look, we want it to be centered around Jesus. We want it to be city focused, but we want it to be church driven and good for your mission. And so there were like 200 some school partnerships that came out of that process. And so it really was mission, serving together, created those relationships, and then kind of back flowing the personal connections, like pastor groups, praying for each other, that sort of thing. And so that's gone for, I don't know, whatever '08 is till now. And it's continued, which has been really beautiful.
That's wonderful. Tell me something good about Portland. We hear all stuff on the news.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Portland's a beautiful city. I think the ethos of, Portlandia is such a myth, right? Like, I think every city is part promise, part myth, and part truth, right? The myth is, your progressive independence will make you completely happy. And that kind of came home to roost with legalization of all drugs and that sort of thing. That kind of backfired on them. And I think the myth of Portland is what creates Portlandia are these poor people that live on the outside of the city. And so what I'm hopeful about the city is there is a sense that people love it, and that something has shifted post COVID where you see people going, how are we going to work together to bring back Portland and what it was? And there's real collaboration and value to that. And so yeah, I think it's a great city. I can't imagine leading anywhere else. I think I was made for a very non-churched environment.
Well, it's wonderful that you're there. Hey, how this is a question I get asked. How do you find your church planters? How are you raising up leaders?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's been so many different ways. I don't feel like we did any of the churches the same way. Sometimes they come to us and they embed and kind of go through a process. We made a ton of mistakes at the beginning where we would sort of embed then assess. And you're 2 years down the road with a guy that's been embedded and he gets assessed, and it's like, this guy shouldn't be a church planner. And you're like, oh my gosh. So a lot of learning it the hard way. And there is something when you're a church planting church that I do think people, church planners hear about you. And so some of it's come that way. Some of it we've been able to raise up. But, very few, even if you are a developmental culture, that means you're still going to have a very small percentage of people that you develop that are going to be like church planner leaders
Right.
versus, associates or execs and so we've just tried to keep that developmental culture going, and it's attracted some church planners from the outside. If we find a guy that moves into town to plant from Indiana, we try our best to like scoop them up and go, before you go, kill yourself, like sit with us for a year, learn some things about the city. So some of it's been that way because they actually were assessed and good, but they culturally did not understand the lay of the land. So I don't know if we've ever done it the same way twice. I wish I had a perfect answer for that. I think we're all scrambling to figure that one out.
One of my theories is that apostolic people, such as yourself, never really lack for having leaders around them. And I look at the book of Acts, and I get asked this all the time. Hey, how do you guys find your leaders? It's like, well, we're a network mostly of apostolic entrepreneurial type people. And entrepreneurial apostolic people just kind of attract leaders, raise them up, others find them. And so, hey, let's release the apostolic people to have some time to find and develop leaders, and also the encouragers. There's the Pauls who attracted folks, and then there's the Barnabas type who, hey, you can do this.
Absolutely.
The Ralph
And
Lauren.
I think the biggest obstacle for a lot of those churches is you want a church planner, but you don't want to release them. You want to define what they plant. You want to set all the parameters, and you don't really. And if you have a church planner, that's not going to go well, right? Because they need to go plant what they're called to plant, how they see it. So how, learning that dance of like, we're going to fund you, we're going to equip you, but we're going to release you, like literally release you. There's something that happens in the mind of pastors once the church kind of grows and they have their budget that it all belongs to them and it's theirs to give away. And I'm like, man, we need to act like none of this belongs to us. And that's what was so great about tithing. When your church budget's 100 grand and you're giving away 10 grand, that feels like a lot. But when it's 3 million and you're giving away 300,000, that feels like a lot. And it starts to get easier to decrease those numbers, which I mean, we're guilty of in certain years. I just think that attitude of like, let them go, trust them, give them all the resource and support you can, and they're going to make mistakes and they're not going to plant your church, and that's okay. We tried to do like multi-congregational, and it worked for like the first year to kind of build a core group, and then it became a hindrance to have like the Imago name. And so we just were like, great, rename it, take it, whatever is going to help you plant the church that God is inviting you to plant, we're all in. And maybe it's messier and doesn't have that kind of organizational perfection to it that a lot of multi-site stuff does. But I just think it's more beautiful.
I agree with you, and I really appreciate your attitude of release them, let them go. Well, hey, you've given us a few already, but end with what's a leadership tip you have for leaders or church planters? Leadership tip.
Yeah, I think two off the top of my head that continue to kind of rock me. The first is God called you to love you, not use you. And if you're super uncomfortable with being loved by God, it's going to show up in everything you do. And that has been kind of a 30-year journey for me to get comfortable. I was great with God using me. Like, I should pay you back for everything you did for me. But loving me unconditionally, unmerited, just because I'm your son, that felt uncomfortable. And so, but I think it showed in those early years of the church, and our discipleship, our preaching, how I treated people. So get comfortable with being the beloved. I think it'll help you finish well, because someday you're going to have to give it all away. You're going to have to step down. You're going to have to let go. And man, most guys don't. Quite honestly, we're going to die with our boots on. Well, that might be great for you, but it's not great. Like, most of the congregation isn't excited about that prospect. And then the other one, I would say, the other one, I think, if 10% or less of the people are pissed at you, don't quit doing what you're doing. Like, if 12 people are mad at you and you have a church of 100, 200 people, keep going. Like, it's fine. I think it's the loudest voice, the loudest critic can really sideline a leader off of his mission or vision. And that 90%, like, yeah, if half your church is upset, then you might want to listen to God. Did you hear that right? And maybe you did, and you need to do it. But that 90-10 thing, I heard it somewhere, and it's like, man, that is so brilliant, because yeah, you might get complaints after you did X, Y, and Z. But if it's like, well, yeah, there were 6 people that were upset out of 200 people, like, you're not even close to 90%. You're fine. Keep going, that 10%. So I think that's, be free to keep leading until you hit that number.
And you have the treasure keeping count. You're at 8.7%.
I mean, no, the elders will definitely keep you aware of what percentage you're at.
It's time to get that resume out, because we've been running in the red because you're 13% for a while.
We've been at 25% for 3 months. Yeah. I think I did that a couple times too. So,
well, those are both really brilliant tips. I appreciate that. And the 90-10, I have not heard that before. It's usually just 2 people who are really loud.
Yeah, but man, they can discourage a leader to want to, like, quit.
Oh, tell me about it. Yes. Well, you just encouraged me, because I'm just doing the numbers here, and with my network, I think I'm only running about 7% who want to kill me.
You're great.
I'm good. I got a little cushion.
You got a little more to go. Like, turn it up.
Hey, thanks so much for just telling your story. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for your major impact in the kingdom so far, and we're looking forward to even more of that in the future.
Thanks, man. It's great being with you.
Christian Community Credit Union is America's leader in biblical banking solutions. As a trusted ministry partner of Excel Leadership Network, they are dedicated to serving ministries in all life stages of growth. Whether you're planting a new church or expanding, Christian Community Credit Union will come alongside your ministry to help you grow so you can serve more. They offer low-rate ministry loans as well as products to maximize your ministry's money, including high-interest checking, savings, and CDs. Take the next step and learn more at mycccu.com/excel. That's mycccu.com/excel. Membership eligibility is required. Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.